Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Steve Hall, and on the other end is Pascal Floor. Pascal, random side topic. I don't know why I got there, but I went through my archive on my Instagram stories and it shot all the way to like the earliest ones that were possible. And the earliest date is like, I think it's like 2018, like around Christmas time. And we were at a Martin McDonald MNU and Aragon kind of seminar conference thing, and man, we look kind of different.
It's funny that you're bringing it up because yesterday I have a NAS at home, which is kind of like your own. You can create a server on it. It's more so for backup reasons, right? Where there are two kind of separate hard drives. One backs up the other. So if there's ever a breakdown, your data is still kind of secured. And this is especially for kind of all of the pictures from family and stuff, because this is something that would break my heart into two if I were to lose these kind of things. And I was yesterday going through kind of old stuff, and I was actually also taking a look at footage from back in 2017 when we kind of came together, and it was actually, we were looking quite different back then. Quite different. It's crazy.
Yeah, that was when you were like, to talk, like people have heard about kind of your transformation in terms of food and what you're eating, but you're like the fact that you're able to maintain the level of leanness you are now.
Yeah,
like, that's such a stark, like your like if we think about like your general baseline, you were certainly holding just a level of like body fat higher than you are now. Like it's just a step, like it was kind of like where you would standardly sit. So it's like, it's incredible to see that, like people say, is it possible? What have you? It's like, it is if you put in the work and you have the habits and structure and things.
Absolutely. I think it's very interesting that you are actually bringing that up, because I haven't thought about it in a very long time. Because back when I was growing up until the age of 14, I was obese. No way about it, or putting it in a different way. Then after that, I was actually fairly lean throughout my adolescence years. And that was super easy for me to maintain, especially at the age of 15, 16, 17, you in puberty. I do remember what I ate during that time frame, and I still ate a lot of food, but it was primarily clean. It was just that before that, I was just eating so much junk that I was still fairly active. I was playing in like 3 different kind of sports teams: football, handball, cricket. So I was very, very active. And then alongside that, of course, going out with friends, playing basketball, skateboarding, all that kind of stuff. So basically lots of activity. I think if I were to go back, I have not really a concrete idea of how much calories I was consuming on a daily basis, but I would very much assume there was somewhere probably between like 3,000 to 4,000 calories. And that was where I was maintaining easily, right? And I was fairly lean. That was a time where I was weighing, I don't know, somewhere around the 60, 65 kilogram mark or so, right? And then I moved to Berlin, of course, with lots of drugs and alcohol and less activity with all that kind of stuff. Put on a little bit more fat. And then I got into lifting. And first then, I was then going through the phase where I did, what was it called again? Not starting strength, but the other thing. The
like 5-3-1?
No, the more advanced, the Texas method. This is kind of the second step after then starting strength. And I was gaining on that. And I pushed it then from somewhere around like 70 kilograms all the way up to then 80 kilograms. And then ever since then, I was never really below the 80 kilograms, and sometimes even pushing it all the way up to 95 kilograms even, way too fat. And I think that for the vast majority of my life, I was probably closer to somewhere around 75 kilograms. Now, to bring it up, yesterday I had a look at the transformation pictures that I did back in 2013. It was one of my first intentional cutting phases, like where I was really sitting down and like, all right, this is how we do things now. And I was then taking like over a couple of weeks pictures, same position, just like a selfie. And it was crazy to me, the difference, because I haven't looked back at those pictures in a very long time. And you can just see how much muscle mass I have put on my frame, even though that I was going through phases where I was probably not the most productive, had times where I was like binging, had times where I wasn't really having the greatest training sessions as well. And yet, 10 years later, close to 10 years later, you can actually then say like, hey, a lot has changed. It's just the starting point that may be different for each and every individual.
Yeah, it's great to just document that journey. And it's like you said, the starting point's different. And so that journey is going to look a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that like things don't have to be perfect to make progress. Like people seek perfection when they should just be seeking progress. And like if you're making progress, like you should be really happy with yourself, because most people aren't making that progress with their physique. And yeah, you could make better progress and what have you. Maybe you could have changed some things, but a lot of the stuff that you went through there, you had to learn to get better. And then also some of it was just completely outside of your control. And same goes for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing is, the original point that he brought up is that I'm now able to maintain that body weight. I'm also very happy about this, to be honest, because there was a lot of work and effort that needed to be put forth in order to actually make this happen. And I'm now at a point where I'm not suffering from kind of, I don't know, being deprived or anything alike. It's not that I think that my body fat levels are so low that I can't really maintain that status. That's also why I'm a huge believer that people, when they are talking about that they are too lean to maintain, they maybe they are just repeating what they've heard somewhere, or maybe they've never really given it a try to truly maintain there. They are then, of course, in a deprived state. After cutting phase is much harder, right? The body has been in that deprived state and wants to pull you back to that level where you've been before. So you need to actually put in the work and effort to make it happen. And then over time, once those negative adaptations have dissipated, first then you're really able to tell whether you are too lean or not. Because if then, after kind of a couple of weeks, the negative adaptations haven't dissipated and you still feel weak, the libido is still not present and all that kind of stuff, then chances are you are too lean. But for the vast majority of people, I don't think that this is the case for them. They take a look at something like you, for example, Steve, when you've been at your peak when it comes to the contest season, and you're then saying like, okay, I was so lean, this was unsustainable to maintain. They've never really taken the time to think about your levels of leanness, right? They just think or have the words in their head, when you are lean, then it's hard to sustain. Instead of thinking about that there is a little bit more of a context or needs to be context to it, because I think many people can definitely maintain their status on a leaner level. It just requires a little bit more work and effort at first. And that is something that many people aren't willing to do and go through. They immediately want to feel good again and also give in to those cravings because it's kind of, I don't know, satisfying in the short term.
Couple of things that I think were really well said. One of them is that kind of, I don't know if it's quite parroting, but in a sense, it's kind of like picking something that people hear as common knowledge, which on average might be true, but doesn't mean it's always the case. And it's always context dependent. So when you do, like as a listener, when you hear these sort of things like maintaining a lean physique is challenging, yeah, on average, it's probably true. I mean, actually, it is true, but like it doesn't mean it's not possible. And maybe for some people, like someone might say it's not possible for them. Sure, it might not be possible for them. Doesn't mean it isn't for you. It's very well said, because I see these things all the time where people come to me like, oh, why are you doing this? Because it said that you have to do this after you do this. It's like, why are you applying these like rules that are just like, they're just general guidelines. Like they aren't things you must have to do. And you might have a reason for something else. So try and apply it to you in your situation. And then I think I agree, actually. A lot of people think like, I don't know, they diet down and they're like, oh man, I'm so tired and fatigued. And they're like, well, this is unsustainable for me. It's like, yeah, well, dieting at that level maybe is, and dieting isn't meant to be sustained really like long term. Get into maintenance, and like you said, give it a bit of time if you want to see if you can maintain a leaner physique. Because then it's a case of how much effort you want, because it might just be more effort than people are willing to put in at that point, like, which is fair.
And likely it is just the after effects that you're still feeling in your system. Right? But once again, it takes a while. It definitely takes a while. But people just want to jump the gun and immediately feel better again, which you can understand to some extent, especially when you have been dieting for a very long time. But also there, I think it becomes then a little bit more handy that you have gone through those cyclical phases of gaining and cutting, because then after a cutting phase, you have a much easier time to transition out of it as well. And it's funny because I just had one of my athletes this week. We had a consultation about it, and he's lean, but he's definitely not that lean, right? And his Dexa scan came back at 8%. But the thing is, I now always take you as an example, because your Dexa scan at your peak of your last contest prep was at around 11.2 or so, I think it was, right? And then I'm just like, all right, let's stay objective here. Let's take a look at Steve, for example, and let's take a look at you right now. Would you say that you are as lean as Steve? He was clearly like, no, definitely not. All right, so if we then know that you are 8%, but Steve is 11%, and you are just from a visual perspective not as lean as he is, do you think that the Dexa is then as accurate and we can rely on that data? Yeah, but no, nothing but here, right? Your body fat percentage may be low, but it's not on like a contest prep level of leanness where you are basically compete or going to worlds and you're that shredded and lean. And chances are then you're able to just like sustain here, especially because it was a decent level of leanness, but nothing crazy, right? It's now, of course, hard for you to imagine what he looked like. And I was just like, well, why do you think that it's that this is something that he can't maintain? And he was just, yeah, because I've read articles and people told me that this is unsustainable. Like people without seeing him, it was just something like, so yeah, I was the one starting and I had such a hard time actually maintaining that leanness. That's what he heard from other people. And they were then saying like, don't even get there because you can't really sustain that. And then he's also reading some articles where it's like, when you're lean, it's hard to maintain. But what does it actually mean? What level of leanness are we talking about? And then he's referring back to kind of the body fat percentages of like, yeah, but they told me everything below like 12% to 10% of a body fat percentage is very, very hard to maintain. Yes, but if the data is inaccurate, we can't really rely on that argument to begin with.
Man, I know, and I'll just be completely honest, I went and did that vlog for the Dexa, and we both discussed this because I was a little bit uncomfortable doing it in the first place because I was just like, I don't want people to take from this that Dexa scans are needed, required, actually particularly helpful, because in all honesty, the reason I'd never got a Dexa scan before that, and I'm unlikely to get another one after it, is because I don't value that data to a large extent. I think there are smart ways to use it, but I don't think you need it by any means. And like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it might be something like a 5% error rate, which would make sense. Like maybe it's saying he's 8 and it could be a 5% error rate too lean. And then he's like in the mid-teens, and maybe visually that's where you'd assess him at. And so that becomes then more helpful.
Yeah, because he was then also going ahead and asking me like, okay, what do you think? How low would my body weight need to be as lean as Connor Steve? And of course, he was clearly lacking the muscle mass that you have, basically,
sure,
which creates then, of course, being much leaner. Often, especially with kind of skinny, fat people, at first, they are dieting down. And sometimes people are super lean, but it doesn't really show because they lack the muscle mass to really pop against the skin. But I was saying, like, probably another 15 pounds to 20 pounds to really be kind of at that peak conditioning, right? And then you're still not looking like him, but that's probably what you would need to lose. And he was kind of completely shocked about that. He would then need to weigh around kind of 140, right? But this is what bantam, for example, is. People often don't even know it, right? Especially the one time when we had Brad on the podcast and someone was accusing him of steroid use, and Brad was just coming out and saying like, buddy, I'm weighing 140 on stage. Do you really think I'm on gear?
It's the same with Eric Salazar. I think I'm just like, I say that name because I'm always like, I'm sorry if I get it wrong, Eric. But Eric came on the podcast. I think still people like accused him. Anyone who looks like most kind of natural guys who get crazy shredded, who look very jacked and muscular, are normally quite short and therefore normally weigh quite little on stage. Now, there are definitely exceptions to that rule, but Eric and also Brett are not exceptions to this rule. And so, yeah, you have to, I think people see pictures, and if they saw then Brett standing next to someone who was enhanced, or same with Eric, someone who was enhanced, they can hold their own for sure, because that's what bodybuilding is. It takes into account like proportions and everything, but you'd soon realize like, oh, okay, like now I understand it a little bit more. And to get to that level of condition, like, it's crazy how much weight you do have to lose sometimes, and people don't realize. I think it's the same, like Alberto Nunez, I think weighs like 160 pounds or something on stage. People probably think he weighs way more than that. He's like 5'9", 5'10". And it's just like, no, you're not going to weigh that much on stage for the most part. So.
No, absolutely. To go back to then kind of being able to maintain at a lower, I wouldn't even say lower body fat percentage, but just like lower weight. Only because you could possibly, doesn't mean that you should. Because of course, there's also opportunity cost added, especially when you're a competitive bodybuilder. You really want to make sure to actually then get out of that perhaps uncomfortable zone as quickly as you can. And you don't really want to take the chances most of the time, where it's like, yeah, possibly I could maintain here, but right now I don't know. And if I first am to figure it out in like 1 month or maybe 1.5 months from now, this is time better spent maybe at gaining, right? I think it's very important to bring it up. Whereas then some people, of course, especially the ones who have a harder time in the transitionary period after a cutting phase, and they are just like usually very, very much binging or so, maybe it's a good idea to learn to actually control yourself after then a cutting phase, and not so much maintain, but kind of bring your body more so to a baseline level, and then more so aggressively bump it up, so that you're not overindulging or so.
I think if I was going to analogize it, if you're like a race car driver and you're doing a track and you have this, like, I don't know, really hard bend, the first time you go around that bend, it's probably not going to be that successful, but every time you go around the track, you learn how to take that bend better, and you learn yourself and how to take that. Because another, like you brought up the example of, even if you can maintain that lean level, maybe it's not the best thing to do. Perfect example is me, because I was looking back at what I was doing back then. Can you believe when we were there, I was 170 pounds. Yeah. That's how much that's around my stage weight. And I was like basically maintaining like 5 pounds above my stage weight. I was in a maintenance phase. I looked through the stories. I was like, Steve, why the fuck were you maintaining at the point? I could, but it was not productive thing to do. And I learned from that and had definitely grown from that.
You're the best example, I think, because you could easily maintain there and stay lower. But it clearly showed that it wasn't productive for you at all, right? And I think that for me personally, I've always pushed it up too high. That was clearly the case when I just looked back at some of the pictures. I was just like, I was actually quite disgusted by the way that I looked for shorter, and also a vast majority of time, especially like during the time frame between 2016 up to 2018. Maybe early stages of like 2019. I'm now looking back and I'm quite disgusted, because I was way too aggressive. And there was, of course, even the time where I was then also having dealt with binges, which didn't really make it any kind of easier, and was probably also the reason as to why the body weight jumped up that much. I don't think that I would have done it intentionally. But yeah, now looking back, and sometimes you just need that time so that you can put some distance, emotional distance behind you and what has happened, in order then to learn your lessons, to figure out what to do moving forward. And that was one of those things where I was just like, I'm someone who doesn't need to push it up that high, that's for sure. I'm now sitting nearly 20 kilograms under what I was back in 2018, right? And I should have never pushed it up there. Now, you can always take a look at it from this perspective. There's always kind of a positive in the negative experience. Because I've pushed there, I know now that I don't have to push there, you know? So you can always take some lessons away from it, but sometimes you just need that time, right? because otherwise you can't really make those objective calls.
It's like we were both at the extreme either end of this, and we both found like a middle. Like you're 20 kilos lighter, I'm 10 kilos heavier than then. So that's why I love doing these with you, Pascal, as well, is because we have such different journeys. Like we're both on the same journey, but we have different experiences, which I think then helps hopefully other people hearing this. And I also appreciate you big time, because I think a lot of competitors go through something you went through like during those years previous, where there are these binges and they push their body weight up potentially too high, and they maybe don't share that, don't disclose it. I'm not sure. I'm just theorizing that I think that maybe does happen. And they just are like, oh, I've just pushed up, that you've got to push your body weight up aggressively. They like sell it to themselves that this was required to build more muscle. And maybe it's because they haven't got that relationship quite there yet with food and things. But
well, what's cool, now that you're bringing it up, that we are such two different entities. I have the feeling though that that the roads actually come closer and closer together at some point. Maybe not from a muscular perspective. I still think that you're way more muscular than I am, and I probably never will catch up with you. That's all right. But I'm more so talking about the way we approach kind of training, the lessons we've learned, have given us different experiences, but it's bringing us closer and closer together in the way that we act as a bodybuilder, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I see that. And that is nice, actually, I think.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. Just
on that note, like we more and more come to the realization about the actually truly important things. We know that time is one of the biggest drivers as well. We know that we need to bring the intensity, all that kind of stuff, right? So on our journeys, when we've both been on our roads, we were there alone. We were just like looking around. There were so many signs and we couldn't really interpret them. And also it was kind of distracting. Too many impressions, right? We didn't really know what to focus on. And now we are just like riding or driving down that alley or rather road, and less signs are actually popping up, but more so just the important ones, right? And then we're now coming at some point on the same road where it's just like, all right, we have like maybe 3 or 4 signs that we are focused on, and the rest is something that we can just like, I don't know, filter out or so.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
I like that analogy. It works really well, because that's definitely something I know in the last few years that's really helped me. Is I would get distracted by various like signs, or in terms of what we are going through, it might be a new study or a different person's coming out with a new thing that they're doing, or something I'm doing is contradictory to what another expert is doing, whatever. And I'm more focused now on my own path, my own journey, my road, and the signs that are important to me. So yeah, that analogy works out really well.
What did you want to say, actually?
I was just going to say, how are things, because we haven't spoken in 2 weeks, and I believe you had your holiday, not a holiday, you had a bit of a break, you went away for a weekend.
Yeah.
And then deloaded, and now you're in is this your first like proper like off-season improvement season mesocycle now?
Kind of, yeah.
Crazy that it's like halfway through the year.
Yeah. The ankle is still kind of bothering me a little bit. I don't know. I've already talked with Mike, so our in-house physio, about it, what I need to do. And he basically said like sometimes tissue heals up, but the tissue around it is still kind of sending signals as if it's injured. So I need to kind of loosen it up and do a little bit of mobility drills to just send the signal that everything is all right. So that's something that I need to work on right now, because of course the ankle dorsiflexion is still kind of limited. What was very interesting though, yesterday I was actually taking a look at the pictures right after the show, where I still had a tan on, where I still was shaved and all that kind of stuff. And I have to admit, this looks just freaking amazing, doesn't it? Yeah. I was just like saying to Katie that I've said it so often. And of course, when you're observing it from the outside, you are way more objective. And whenever you say something like this to your athletes, it's like, once you have experienced kind of a certain level of leanness, your understanding of what lean is will have changed forever.
Yeah.
And that's something where I was just like looking back at the pictures, or the videos rather, and I was just like, at that time I thought like, oh no, I'm definitely not lean. And now I'm looking back and I'm just like, shit, I would love to look like that right now, you know?
I know exactly what you mean. I was literally like, I could do a mini cut at the end of this this year, and then I could start a prep for next year. I was like, oh, because I look back and I'm like, did I actually look like that?
Yeah.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
And I'm just like, especially because you said it yourself, considering then stepping on stage, and I was just, because I did the chapter, I opened it up, but for me, it was never really closed, you know, of like, I never really pushed it to the level of leanness that I know I could push it to. And the last season was just proof of that. If I had plenty of time, I could push it way further than this. This just makes me, after having seen that video, just kind of quite motivated to go for it again, to be honest. And then next time, really just crush the look and be the guy, because I will not have a huge amount of muscle mass, but be the guy who just comes in as lean as he can, and by that, hopefully, get some points.
What are the areas? So I guess you're still just, it's just a thought in your head, mate. You haven't set on like competing next year or anything. No. What was I going to say? Was that the video where we were in Muscleworks and we trained with Jess as well? Is that the one?
No, it was actually my gym, where I was just I was just recording. At one point, I was setting up my stand. I was actually positioning myself in a decent spot when it comes to lighting, and I was just like, "Holy shit, this is actually
so this is
pretty
footage
cool.
no one's seen.
No, not really. Yeah, exactly.
We need to see it.
And it's actually pretty cool. And funny enough, because you said whether I've considered actually stepping on stage next year, there was a thought about it, and I'm not entirely certain about it as of yet, because bear with me here. I know this may sound contradictory to everything we always talk about, but the thing is that ever since the end of the contest prep, I didn't really have the chance to actually go into a gaining phase. But during that time, I was still managing to recover very, very nicely from a physiological perspective, because I kept my shit together and I needed to take the time due to the injury. And I know that pushing it right now doesn't make any kind of sense. Now, what is it now? 7 months, or nearly 8 months have passed, and I haven't really had the time to really go into a proper gaining phase. Of course, I have gained a little bit of weight ever since then, but it was never really a truly committed kind of gaining phase. Here we are, let's go, right? And now, physiologically speaking, I am relatively fine. I've had a longer time frame where I couldn't really push, and the next season is kind of waiting just outside the door. So I am physiologically recovered. I'm not far away from where I've been the last time. So instead of now actually pushing it up and then cutting down, why not then go for the next time, taking advantage of the spot that you're in. Of course, you won't really come in from a muscular perspective pretty much improved, but I know that this wasn't really the issue for me necessarily. Of course, you can always be bigger, but for me personally, it was more like the leanness that was kind of lacking the last time. All right, and then go for the next season, and then take the time first away, and then compete the next time right before I'm turning 40 or so. So possibly then, that was just a thought that I had, like next year at the age of 36, then take a off season for like 3 years or so, and then compete at 39 before then actually going into the master's class. Well, does that sound absolutely idiotic?
And no, I think it's actually quite a cool example of how, like, if you were to diet down, and this is somewhat what we try and do with, like, if someone's peak off season, like, you don't want to just start prep and then, like, because it's just too far away from stage. If you're 15 plus % over stage weight, that's going to be a lot of weight to lose in one chunk. So you kind of lose it and then maintain. And like normally most people probably don't give quite enough time to that maintenance period, myself included, because you just kind of want to, you don't want to be maintaining for too long. Like you wouldn't have maintained this long, like out of choice. It's just a necessity because of the position you're in. So it's like, if you have maintained that long, or it's almost like once you are at your peak genetic ceiling for like, or close to that, and you want to compete regularly, then you just maintain this leaner physique and you can recover quite well. And like you said, you can maintain quite a lean physique, and then like the dieting process doesn't need to be so severe. So it's a good example of that. I guess it's a question of, what do you want to achieve? Like what's the main objective for next time that you compete?
That's the thing, right? For me personally, what I've realized with the last season is that this is really, and this is not just like parroting or saying it because I think that it has to be said or people are expecting that from me, because I have the feeling that sometimes people say those things just because they think that they have to say it. Such as, I don't know, why do you want to make money? If people are saying like, yeah, so that I don't know, whatever reason, that is kind of, I don't know, an altruistic motive. Bullshit. You want to live a good life. You want to spend money also on the things that you want to, right? And also just like lean back a little bit more and enjoy other parts in life. That's absolutely fine. And there's nothing wrong or kind of ethically or morally wrong in saying this. And the same goes then for this as well. When I'm saying that my ambitions around bodybuilding is just like because this is something that just is for me and I don't have to prove it to anyone else. And that's why I don't need to come in absolutely improved from a muscular perspective, because then Natty News Daily is sharing my results. So, right. By the way, shout out to Natty News Daily. I love your stuff. But it's not, the intention isn't there so that I get the appreciation of my peers. This is just because it was just fun. I had a freaking amazing time stepping on stage, competing with others. And the next time, because I just had such a short time frame, the next time I want to prove it to myself that I'm someone who can push the level of leanness as others can as well. And I mean like really to a level of leanness where just a lot of people are just like blown away by the striated or shredded glutes. That's the type of person that I am. It's not so much about kind of taking the win, placing at a certain place. So for me, it's just about like, I want to kind of go in there and at least for this time, for the next time, be as shredded as I possibly can. And then probably once I've ticked off that box, I can move on to then the next goal. And that is coming in way more muscular the next time with the same amount of leanness.
I guess to me, when I asked that question, it's actually an obvious answer when I was thinking through how you would answer it. And it's essentially to come in better. Yeah. And you left kind of, I guess, fat on the table to be removed. Yeah. So you knew there was potential for more there, and you just didn't have the season to be able to pull it off because in a sense it wasn't planned. Like you kind of wasn't. Did it on, well, you completely did it on a whim. It's just like, I'm dieting, it's going pretty smooth. Yeah. Let's just jump into a show in 10 weeks or however long it was. Yeah. So I can definitely see that. And the main thing, if if you were my client and I was assessing it, I'd be like, okay, like the main thing for me would be that like, we don't want to just repeat. But why you don't want to just repeat your performance? Like you want to bring something better to the table. And if like you had more body fat on you, then maybe you would like to, or you can bring it down. That's progress. So I think that makes I think you have a reasonable rationale to want to compete year to year, which normally most people don't have because they're not in the sort of position you're in. Yeah.
And on that note, it's great that you're bringing it up because I wanted to discuss this as well. Right now, I'm 35 years old. For me, it's not. I just want to enjoy the last days kind of bodybuilding where I can truly kind of, I don't know, bring a... This sounds so wrong because we just had Jeff Alberts on the podcast and he's looking freaking fantastic and amazing. But he's also a different person. Yeah, exactly. He's more the exception rather than the rule. I don't expect that I will be a Masters competitor who's looking freaking amazing, who's able to compete against kind of the 20-year-olds. I'm not as delusional. That's why I want to get the most out of the time that I have right now. And though, must be said, if it turns out that I'm still looking amazing then when I'm turning older, hey, great. But right now, I don't want to take the chances. So it's kind of a YOLO mindset of like, hey, I'm here. I'm maybe having like 5 more years to go in kind of the open bodybuilding class before then actually being able to switch to masters. So let's just have a great time here. And because of the timeline or the deadline is so close or so narrow, I think that my objective is a different one than people who are maybe at their early 20s, mid 20s, maybe even still early 30s, right? Because they have so much more time in front of them and also so much more productive training years in front of them, where I would then encourage them to take a little bit more time away from the gym, because the time will come where you are capable of stepping on stage a little bit more often. Whether you then still want it is a different kind of question. But I think that at the early stages, especially for the first timers who don't really even know whether they like it or not, it's better to go in there with a mentality and mindset and plan of like, hey, I will compete, then I will take like 3 to 4 years off, then I will compete again. And then over time, you can actually change it, decrease the time between then the shows if you really want to. And yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a different objective in my opinion. And I'm not saying that I treat myself like a special snowflake. So it's just that I don't think that I will change completely over the next 5 years in that sense. But I can still improve big time when it comes to, for example, the level of leanness, right?
Yeah, I think it's actually, there's this unique spot, this kind of sweet spot for a natural bodybuilder where they've maybe been training a decade to 2 decades, and they are therefore right near their genetic ceiling, or like in and around their best gains, their best physique essentially. And that's probably your like late 30s or early 40s. And that's the spot where what's the benefit of like really pushing your body weight up, really gain lots of fat? Or is that a better time to basically use about 4 years to compete like almost every year, if it makes sense for you? Maintain quite a lean physique, just get tons of shows under your belt. This is like the best you there's possibly going to be, and you're unlikely to get better. I think there might be a sweet spot there, because I asked Jeff on that podcast, like, do you think your physique now is going to be better than like previous times? And he was like, honestly, probably not. My best physique, I think he said 2014, which is almost 10 years ago, nearer when he was 40 years old. So that was probably the years of his like peak physique. Maintain his muscle mass, maintain a level of leanness, and just dip into shows, recover, dip into shows, recover, dip in. Like that's like your golden years as a bodybuilder. So I think that makes complete sense that you're thinking about that at 35, where you're like, when the opportunity presents itself where stepping on stage is quite a reasonable task, the temptation is like, well, I've almost got the physique that I'm ever going to get. And that kind of scares me a little bit, because I'm getting towards that time where I'm like, I'm going to have to, like, where I'm just going to be like, well, it's like you've, like in terms of monetary terms, you've built the empire, you've got all the savings, you've got all the money. There becomes a period of time in your life where you should probably spend, like start spending it and using it where you're fit, healthy, well, and then like move on after this or whatever.
It's a great example. And to be also fair, once again, to 35 isn't like super old. I know this, but it's kind of for bodybuilding standards, also for especially like professional sports. It's an age where it's kind of slowly declining, you know? You still have a long way to go, but it's slowly declining, and you are not really expecting to just like see an exponential or even linear growth anymore. So, and also on that note, I know for a fact that I'm not the guy who's going to win show after show. So knowing this, this is not a pessimistic mindset. This is just a realistic mindset. I'm 35. I'm not the biggest guy now. So how likely is it that I'm going to be the biggest guy in like 3 to 4 years from now? It's very unlikely, right? And with knowing this, instead of being down about it and be like, then I don't even want to care about competing at all anymore. Hey, no. I still enjoy it, so why not make the best and get the most out of the time that I have? I have a great time, not beating myself up, and it's not about kind of chasing a specific outcome of like the results. It's more like chasing the outcome of results, about the physique and self-improvement, in my opinion. And I know this sounds always kind of cheesy, and especially like younger guys, I think that if I had heard this kind of thing when I was younger, I would have just like said, oh yeah, I know what he's talking about, but probably I didn't really have any kind of clue because I still had like a little bit more aggressive ambitions and stuff, not necessarily about bodybuilding, but just in general in life. And I also know that there are people out there who are like younger, who have great potential. And there I would just say like, yeah, focus on building. If you have the potential, of course, take it a little bit more seriously than I do from a competitive perspective, because right now, even though that I have a competitive spirit, I'm competing against myself, not against others. Whereas when you are someone like you, Steve, for example, you took it even to Worlds. The next time you're stepping on stage or doing a show, I would very much assume that you want to bring the very best, because you're not only competing against yourself, but you are also competing against your environment as well, or the other competitors.
Yeah, I see what you're saying completely. No, completely. And it's nice actually to have, you have the perspective of like your younger self and bring that up so that someone who maybe is hearing this can also kind of take that in on board as well. Actually, a question I was thinking, I don't know what the kind of general rule is in terms of when you start fighting sarcopenia, because the reason I brought up 40 is I think around once you start hitting 40 and plus, assuming you're already well trained, I think that's the years where it's like making gains or just like maintaining is more so the objective. That's how I feel. But I think Alberto Nunez is actually in his 40s now, and I certainly, from the shots I've seen of him, he definitely looks like he's improved. And it's, yeah, I guess he's probably in that sweet spot now where he wants to compete more frequently.
So I have not the knowledge around sarcopenia to actually make a very good statement about it, but as far as I know, isn't it more so looking at people who aren't really doing resistance training? And when taking a look at people, at older individuals who have been doing resistance training, that the loss, so the atrophy over the years was actually very, very minimal. And the amount of muscle mass that they were carrying was actually very close to their younger counterparts.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So that's where I'm like, is that like when you're 40 plus as a lifter, are you maintaining? Like you're able to maintain and you're like, so, but gaining is just unlikely at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. You're bringing up a good point. That's something that I would more so assume. But once again, I don't really know that much about the scientific literature around this, but I would very much assume this, just extrapolating from what we know about protein synthesis with increased age, for example, and just like cellular breakdown as well. I would very much assume that then at some point you're basically, all you're doing is kind of maintain, or at least very, very minimally gain. And then over time, it's kind of like, yeah, maintaining, especially what makes sense. If you think about what is necessary in order to maintain muscle mass, it's much, much lower. And if then the threshold of then that you need to overcome in order to actually gain muscle mass is continuing to increase, it just makes it so much harder to actually get to that one, especially because at some point you're probably running into connective tissue issues, where then the connective tissue MRV and things that you can recover from is much lower than what it is that you need in order to actually spurt some growth.
It's like testosterone starts dipping. Like I think it's called like I don't even want to say it for some reason. Anabolic resistance. I think that's like the thing that you're like, that's coming up against you in like in a large way during those years. So I think it makes sense at that sort of period of time up until late 30s, like still pushing, like you said, you can still make some gains now. And then but the opportunities to compete and things start coming up and arising.
I really hope that our discussion now doesn't really send any kind of false ideas or give the people the wrong impression that what it is that we've preached in the past is kind of contradictory to the things that I brought up and am considering for myself, because that's definitely not what I want to actually put across. I still believe that the vast majority of people, especially the younger you are, the more time you should take in building, and also personal preferences come into play as well. And then the older you are, I mean, consider where you're at, whether you can be highly competitive. Then I still think that you should treat things such as your younger counterpart, of then still taking time to build, still taking time away from then stepping on stage. But if you're then only doing it, once again, for them more so personal reasons and not so much competing against others, more so because you just enjoy competing and you want to improve, then perhaps actually start to try to compete more often if that's something that you want. I mean, now that I'm actually saying it out loudly, I don't really have a good recommendation for then the vast majority of people, because I realize that it's just such a highly individual thing. But for the general bodybuilder, they are often a little bit younger. And they are, I think it's safe to say, like, take the time to actually build.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, I think for sure the message of like that we've always said is, especially we're talking for naturals here, like in your earlier years of bodybuilding, I would say try and take at least 2 years, because you're recovering for like a big chunk of time after your show anyway. So realistically, if you compete year to year, you have a few months of an off season. Whereas once you're near your kind of ceiling, probably in your like late 30s to 40s, that's when the opportunities to gain loads of muscle are so small that maybe you're at your peak. Try and like stay a bit leaner, compete more regularly, because like now you do have the, like, hopefully a lot of people at that stage have like a much more competitive physique, so they're going to do way better in shows than they would have done when they're younger. Whereas like invest in a better physique when you're younger and take the time for a longer off season. So I think it just reflects where you are in your bodybuilding journey. And like you said, there's personal preference as well.
It's crazy to think though that I'm already 35.
35. Yeah, dude, I thought about it today. I was like, how am I over 30 now?
Yeah.
What's going? I got tattoos in my 30s. Like, am I old? Like, what's going on?
I don't know what's up with my brain, but do you remember, and do you think back to a lot of scenarios that happened in your childhood, and do you remember them very well?
Maybe not regularly, no.
Okay. Because I have it so often that I'm actually, I don't know why. Sometimes those thoughts just creep into my head. So, for example, it's very, very often that I'm thinking about a specific time when I was 16 during, it was definitely, I was 16. I had long hair. And that was also the time where I was then playing music and all that kind of stuff. And there was this one girl, and I'm thinking about it fairly often. Actually, it's not that I'm kind of, I mean, it's now.
Where is she?
I would. It's more out of curiosity of just knowing what happened to that person that was so important to me, like back then. I don't know. I still kind of think about things that we did together, for example, and that also then applies to other scenarios where I was younger, thinking about kind of the friends from back in the days, like. I'm just curious to also then know what has happened to them, etc., etc. And just thinking about it makes you realize, man, that you're 35 already. And I still do remember so many things from back in the days. Of course, the mind is a tricky thing. Sometimes you think that this is what happened, when in reality, it's just something that your mind made up. Or it kind of tried to once again connect the pieces, and it's actually a completely misleading thing, and it's not how it happened in the past. But I still do remember so many things, and often I just realize, like, shit, I'm 35 now. I don't even know how or where the time has gone, and this is something that only old people are saying.
Yes, that perspective that you have. And you realize how every week, I do this regularly, actually. This is something I do. I'm like, how the hell is it already Thursday? Quite often it's Thursday or Wednesday. I'm like, how's it already this time? Like, what the hell? Like, maybe it's like Thursday night. And I'm like, how is it Friday tomorrow? Like every week. And then the weekend just flies by. And I'm just like, man, time is going way, way too quickly. So, yeah.
That's why I'm not a big fan of TGI Friday.
Thank God it's Friday. Yeah. I actually do that
comes way too
because
fast.
people love me throwing up that clip on Fridays, but I purposely just put, whenever I use a GIF, I put up just a Friday one. I never put thank God it's Friday or like thank goodness it's Friday, because I'm like, in reality, like I'm not fussed that it's Friday. It's just people really love
it's more
dance.
like, why the hell is it Friday already? God, the time passed by too quickly. But yeah, I mean, anything else on your end or so, Steve? We've now touched more so about kind of my journey here, my thoughts, my considerations now moving forward, which ended up in a great discussion. But anything on your end that is important for the listeners to know about?
Not really. Just, I think I really need to put my head in the right mindset, because it's so rare that I go for more than 5 weeks of like pushing before a deload. And I have a tattoo booked in a week Saturday, just a short session, but I was like, I need to line that up with a deload. So I just ran this mesocycle as if I was just going to be able to do 6 weeks. Yeah. But as I go through the 5th week, it's becoming clear to me that 6th week, at best, I'm going to repeat performance. Yeah. So I'm going to see what happens next week. I'm probably just going to go at it and see if I can learn something.
What if that you're just like increasing your MRV artificially and that you are adding 1 or 2 more rest days?
I won't do that. So I will just attack it as like it's a normal week. Okay. But if I go into a session and I'm just tanking, I will just like leave it. And then I'll just like get as many hard sessions in as I can. Just more so for my psychology than anything else. And then I'll deload.
Because that's always something that I suggest people to do when we have planned out a long mesocycle, because they are then going out on a holiday where they can't train. Sure. It just makes sense to extend the mesocycle. And I'm always saying, okay, when we are now in week number 5 and week number 6, and you're coming up to the point where you feel under recovered, you can easily throw in another rest day or even 2 sometimes, just to actually increase your energy capacities. But a little bit, it's kind of like we always bring kind of motorsports and stuff like that, you know, when you're in a car and the fuel tank is nearly empty, right? And you're just like driving to the next fuel station and you just fill it up so that you can actually then get a couple of miles again. And then you get to kind of the light in your car gets on as well, that you need to actually find another fuel station, and then you're just turning over to the next fuel station up until the point where you're then actually arriving at home. That's kind of the way that I like to see it, that it's just like taking the rest days in order to actually make it then back home. And even if that means by the end that you're stopping the mesocycle 5.5 weeks instead of completing the entire 6th week.
Very similar to my approach, apart from I normally just like either just is essentially actually the same. I either tell people to like skip those sessions or go in and do like light deloady style sessions, something like that. So I'll kind of auto-regulate it. If it was 7 weeks, I would have pre-planned to have some like light sessions or extra rest days in there, which is what I do with clients. But because it was 6 weeks, I was like, maybe I can just gut out 6 weeks, especially because it was coming off an active recovery. And I was like if I take smaller progressions week on week, and I just didn't do that. I just approached it like a normal mesocycle. And it's nice that it could just confirm that I've been doing everything right. If I go into week 6 and somehow beat my week 5, my mind will be like, wow, like I have left something there. So, but having especially like leg days, man, when I finish some of those sets, I'm just like, how next week?
Yeah, I would be surprised if you are surprising yourself, because I think that you have a very good understanding already of how far you can push it, where your RERs lie, and then very much surprising yourself is something that rarely ever happens. That's the thing. What I've also then been referring to when I said about or talked about how to pre-plan the next mesocycle, for example. At some point, when you're pushing to 1 and 0 RER by the end of a mesocycle, you will get better and better to have like accurate data that you then can use for then the first week of the next mesocycle, because after a deload, you're a little bit more recovered. You're expecting that some of the adaptations have taken place, so you should be able to do maybe 1 more repetition and subtract then the 4 reps overall, and then you are falling probably at around 4 RER, even though that it may not feel like it, it's very, very likely that it is, because you're not going to expect that you're now able to increase the load by 5 kilograms or able now to actually do 3 more reps or so. Very unlikely.
Yeah, it's so predictable. You're actually right. Like, I'm so often come into this final week and I'm like, oh, I wonder if like that will actually be not RAR, and I'll do the set and I'm like, yeah, I got 1 more rep. Like, there's just like, I could have tried everything in my heart to have got another one. It's like, no, it's just, it's almost so predictive at this point, which is nice because like it shows you're doing the right thing there. And then the only other thing I've got, but this is going to come out too late, is I'm going to Liverpool this weekend for the Fit Expo. So I'm actually one of those guys who's sponsored and standing on a stand, and like I can be one of those people that people come and talk to. So
I find it very cool.
Should be fun,
to be honest. Of course, I'm a little bit biased because I'm part of Revive Stronger, but I think that you deserve way more attention and way more appreciation in the industry than you that you actually do.
I appreciate that.
Right, but that's of course coming from a very, very biased perspective from a friend and also the business partner. But that's just my take, and perhaps there are people who agree with me on that one as well.
Don't let me know if you disagree. I don't want to know. So,
but because of that, I find it cool that you are then also at an event like this as well.
Yeah, it should be fun. I haven't been to one of these like since Body Power, and I've never been anything but an attendee at these sort of things. And they're just crazy. So, it should be nice to be with the CMP crew. There's some cool guys on that team, and it's probably going to be, I'm hoping it's not exhausting because I have the week 6 to come through too. Mm-hmm. But actually the cool thing they have there is at the Fit Expo, they've got like a gym they've built within the expo.
All right.
And at the end of the day on the Saturday, we can train there. So I'm going to do one of my sessions there with people, and apparently it's going to be filmed and stuff. So
I hope that you're not tearing your bicep.
Oh God, don't say that.
I'm doing stupid shit because people are just like, they want people to entertain them and stuff. So I've never been to a Fit Expo or so, any kind of fitness events like this. So it's just maybe I have the completely wrong idea on how it actually is. Maybe everything is civil, everything is very informative, or it's the way that I imagine it to be, where people are just like jacked up to the tits, doing like very idiotic stuff of like, I don't know, leg press, full stack, people sitting on top of it, showing off and stuff like this.
I think because it will just be like, because the, what's it called? The expo will be finished. And so all the like public will have gone. So it'll just be like kind of a private session for us. I think it'll be pretty civil. I certainly won't do anything crazy. I'm going to be that boring guy that just does my normal training there, probably, rather than like jump in, and I won't do like randomly do some leg press or something just because other people are, because that is a surefire way to fuck something up.
What if Larry Wheels approaches you and says something about your guns and says that you're the one who is being chosen to actually challenge him on, or I don't know, whatever he comes up with. I don't follow his stuff.
I'm hiding my guns and putting them in my pockets.
Just put on a t-shirt. No one will notice it anyway. Natty, the natty style.
Illusion, exactly. So, actually, I'll be wearing a t-shirt all day, so that'll be great. But I think they've changed. These sort of events have changed from, they used to be very much like you mentioned there, a bit like all over the shop. That was like the Gymshark days when they were like, they just got influencers over and they were all like kind of crazy Ziz type of characters. And it's calmed down to be like much more like educational type things. So do you know Dr. Mike II?
Yeah.
So he's there and he's presenting. So he's doing loads of talks and stuff. And there's other people within like the fitness space who are doing like educational talks. He was like, if I knew you were going, I would have got you to speak. I was like, just as well.
I just want to
so
say,
I don't have to speak.
Why aren't you presenting there?
I was never offered, but I think I've spoken to someone about talking before, but I do need to practice that more because it was better this time round. And it's a good experience. Love that. But
and people would be actually finally educated on an event like this.
So I don't know. I'll obviously have next time we check in next week, I'll have a load of news of how it all went, but hopefully I'm not just like a complete mess.
I'm very much looking forward to what you have to actually say about this, because once again, I have no idea about it. I have my preconceptions when it comes to this. Whether they are true or not, this is just always the question, right? But I think that this is a common thing that you just have. You see something and then you think that you have an idea of how things are, when in reality it's probably far from the truth.
I'm trying to think what was like that
Yeah.
in my life. I don't know. Like a bodybuilding show. I think a lot of people have preconceived ideas how they are, and then it's like, oh, actually, they're a lot of sitting around and not doing much. Cool. I think that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Then, Steve, thank you very much for actually taking the time here, speaking with me. I wish you a lovely Liverpool trip. For the people listening, as always, if you enjoy what it is that you've heard here, leave a like, leave a subscribe. As always, we are always appreciative of the comments in the comment section. The Coaching Corner never really receives a lot of comments. I don't know whether there's something about the algorithm why people aren't really tuning in on those, or maybe people are simply not interested. Could be. It's all Harry's fault. All Harry's fault. Just write in the comment section that Harry is a fucking asshole or something like this, because he's now also sometimes in the comment section and he would be like, what the hell happened here? So just say something very, very mean. No, say something nice about Harry, because YouTube comment section can actually be quite awful. And then he thinks that people don't like him, and that would be devastating because he's such a good guy.
He is a very good guy. It worked well for my vlog. I can't remember what I did. I must have said something like, if you're watching this, comment Goku in the comments. And quite a few people commented Goku, so that worked. So that's a little trick.
Cool. Then, guys, thank you very much, as always, for tuning in. And I guess I speak to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.